Heaven does not sit in silence when God's chosen ones move in obedience. Every step of surrender sends a sound that shakes eternity. Every act of faith becomes a trumpet blast in the throne room of God. The Almighty is not unmoved when His children align their hearts with His will. Chosen ones, understand this truth. Your obedience on earth stirs joy in heaven. There are actions you take that delight the very heart of God, and when you finally rise into them, all of creation seems to respond. When you yield to His Spirit, angels rejoice and the atmosphere shifts. The Father looks down and smiles, for He has found in you a vessel who carries His glory with no resistance. Chosen ones, heaven takes notice when you move in step with the will of God. The kingdom of God is not built on empty words, but on living obedience. Heaven does not rejoice at half-hearted devotion, but when you finally lay aside your pride, your fear, your stubbornness, and say, Lord, here I am, heaven erupts with joy. God does not smile over wasted potential, but He smiles when His chosen ones finally step into the destiny He prepared. This is not theory, this is divine reality. There are moments that mark you forever, moments when your decision causes a response in the courts of heaven, when you lift your hands in surrender, when you release what you held tightly, when you let go of grudges, when you choose His way instead of compromise. Heaven cannot be silent. The angels rejoice not because of wealth, not because of fame, but because one of God's chosen ones has aligned fully with the heart of the Father. Oh, chosen ones, do you not see? The smile of God is greater than the applause of men, more valuable than the riches of earth, more powerful than the strength of armies. When God smiles upon you, no devil can stop your destiny. When God delights in your steps, no enemy can shut the doors He opens. The pleasure of the Father releases a flow of blessings that no man can hinder. There is a sound in heaven when you move in obedience. It is the sound of celebration, the sound of victory, the sound of joy. When you finally let go of your own way and embrace His way, heaven sings over you. God Himself rejoices because His chosen one has trusted Him completely. And in that moment, doors that were locked suddenly swing wide. Chosen ones, obedience is the master key that unlocks the treasury of heaven. Faith is the fire that ignites God's delight. Purity is the fragrance that rises as incense before His throne. Service is the sacrifice that brings Him glory. Every one of these acts releases a smile from heaven, a joy from the heart of God, and a response that changes your life forever. Understand this truth. God's joy is not distant. His smile is not silent. It is active, powerful, and overflowing. When you obey Him, He pours out blessing. When you forgive, He releases breakthrough. When you walk in holiness, He surrounds you with His favor. When you believe boldly, He stretches forth His hand with power. When you serve, He multiplies your impact. The world may overlook your obedience, but heaven never misses a moment. People may ignore your surrender, but the Father sees it, treasures it, and delights in it. Chosen ones, the unseen actions you take in faith resound louder than the greatest trumpet blasts of men. Heaven values what earth dismisses, and the heart of God rejoices over what the world forgets. So when you finally come into full alignment with His will, something shifts in the spirit realm. The smile of God becomes your covering. His joy becomes your strength. His delight becomes your shield. And though the earth may rage, though the enemy may roar, heaven has already declared its celebration over you. Chosen ones, you are stepping into the very things that cause the Father to rejoice with joy unspeakable. Surrender is the fragrance that fills the throne room of God, the sweet aroma that makes heaven rejoice. When you release your grip on your own will and yield to His higher plan, it is not weakness but strength. Chosen ones, God does not delight in those who resist Him, but in those who say with all their heart, Lord, I am yours, lead me as you will. The Father smiles when He sees His children walk the road of surrender. The greatest victories in the kingdom are not won by striving, but by yielding. It is when you drop the weapons of your own control and fall into the arms of His sovereignty that heaven begins to move. Many struggle because they still cling to their own desires, their own plans, their own timing. But chosen ones, the moment you say, "Not my will, but yours be done," the sound of joy breaks out in heaven. Surrender is not the language of defeat. It is the anthem of the victorious. Jesus himself, the Son of God, modeled this truth in Gethsemane when his sweat became like drops of blood. He prayed, "Father, not my will, but yours." That was the moment that shook eternity and opened the gates of salvation for mankind. Heaven rejoices when you echo that same cry from your heart. Chosen ones, God does not desire a divided heart. He does not want 90% of you while you hold the last 10% behind your back. His joy is stirred when you come before him empty-handed, saying, "Take it all, Lord. My dreams, my future, my reputation, my very life belong to you." That is the surrender that brings a smile to his face. There are many who try to walk with one foot in their own will and the other in God's. They try to serve him while still clinging to their own control. But such double-mindedness never delights heaven. God rejoices when he finds a people who burn the bridge to their own way and step fully onto his path with no way back. Chosen ones, that kind of surrender carries the fragrance of heaven. The smile of God comes when you give him the steering wheel of your life and stop trying to wrestle it back. You may fear losing control, but in truth, you are gaining the life you were created for. Heaven's joy is not found in your striving, but in your surrender. The Father rejoices when he sees you trust him more than yourself. Surrender is not a one-time act, but a daily walk. Every morning you rise and declare, "Lord, lead me, guide me, use me." Every evening you lay your head down saying, "I have followed where you led." Chosen ones, every step of surrender is a note in the symphony of heaven's joy. The Father smiles not only at the great sacrifices, but at the small daily choices where you yield to him. When you surrender your will, you open the floodgates of heaven's favor. Obstacles that seemed immovable begin to shift. Chains that bound you lose their power. God's delight is not in watching you struggle to carry burdens he never gave you, but in seeing you lay them down at his feet. Chosen ones, surrender turns the battlefield into a place of victory. Many hold back because they fear that surrender means loss. But in the kingdom, surrender means gain. You do not lose yourself. You find yourself in the perfect will of God. The Father does not rejoice in taking from you, but in giving to you beyond what you imagined. Heaven smiles when you finally see that his will is better than your own. So, chosen ones, the joy of heaven is stirred when you release control, when you stop resisting, when you let go of your own agenda. The heart of God rejoices when you lay everything on the altar without reservation. Every act of surrender becomes a celebration in the throne room of heaven. And as you yield fully, the smile of the Father shines upon you like the rising of the sun. Forgiveness is the language of heaven, the melody that makes angels rejoice and the Father smile with delight. When you release those who have pierced you with words, actions, or betrayal, you are not excusing their sin, but you are choosing freedom. Chosen ones, forgiveness breaks the chains that tie you to the past and lifts you into the liberty of Christ. Heaven cannot stay silent when you let mercy triumph over bitterness. Unforgiveness is a prison with invisible bars. You may think you are punishing the offender, but in truth, you are chaining yourself. Every grudge weighs down your spirit. Every resentment closes your heart. But chosen ones, the moment you say, "I forgive them," those chains snap and heaven rejoices because you have stepped into the very nature of God himself. Forgiveness is not weakness, it is strength that comes from the cross. The greatest display of power the world has ever seen was not when Jesus calmed storms or raised the dead, but when he hung on the cross and cried, "Father, forgive them." That moment sent shockwaves through eternity. Chosen ones, when you forgive, you echo the same cry that broke the power of hell. The smile of God rests on those who forgive because forgiveness is his heart. The Father is rich in mercy and slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love. When he sees his chosen ones reflect his nature, he cannot help but rejoice. Every time you forgive, you are painting a picture of his mercy before the world. You are proving that the cross was not in vain. Some wounds are deep and some betrayals cut like a knife. Forgiveness may feel impossible in your strength, but heaven rejoices when you lean on the Spirit to do what your flesh cannot. Forgiveness is not forgetting what was done, but it is choosing not to let the wound define you. Chosen ones, the Father smiles when you rise above pain and release mercy instead of vengeance. There are blessings that only come when you forgive. The heavens open, peace floods your soul, joy returns to your spirit. Unforgiveness closes the windows of heaven, but forgiveness unlocks them. God's delight is not just in the act itself, but in what it produces in you. Freedom, healing, restoration. Chosen ones, forgiveness makes your life a garden where His joy blooms. The devil trembles when you forgive because he knows he has lost his grip. He thrives on bitterness, resentment, and division, but forgiveness crushes his schemes. Heaven rejoices because forgiveness does what anger and revenge never could. It disarms the enemy and enthrones Christ in your heart. Chosen ones, forgiveness is a weapon that shakes hell and delights heaven. Do not wait until you feel like forgiving, for forgiveness is not an emotion, it is a decision. The moment you choose to forgive, the heavens erupt in joy, even if your feelings take time to catch up. Forgiveness is the step of obedience that pleases God, for it mirrors His own heart toward you. Chosen ones, heaven smiles every time you say, I release them, I let it go. Forgiveness is the fragrance of heaven that rises above the stench of hatred and pain. When you walk in it, you spread the aroma of Christ everywhere you go. People see the light of God shining in you when you forgive what the world says is unforgivable. Chosen ones, the Father's joy is stirred when He sees you shining as a living testimony of His grace. So when you forgive those who hurt you, you are not just healing your own heart, you are making heaven rejoice. You are declaring that the blood of Jesus is stronger than every wound, greater than every betrayal, and more powerful than every pain. Forgiveness is heaven's anthem on earth, and every time you walk in it, the smile of God shines brighter upon you. Holiness is the crown that makes heaven rejoice, the light that pierces the darkness and causes the Father's heart to shine with joy. When you choose purity in a world drenched in sin, you are declaring with your life, I belong to the Lord. Chosen ones, holiness is not bondage, it is freedom, freedom from the corruption of this world. Every time you refuse compromise, the smile of God rests upon you. The world will always invite you to bow to its standards, to lower your guard, to blend in with the crowd. But heaven rejoices when you stand tall and say, no, I will not defile myself, I will live for Christ. Every act of holiness is a song of worship that rises before God like incense. Chosen ones, every time you turn away from sin, you light a fire of joy in heaven. Holiness is not an old-fashioned word. It is the eternal nature of God Himself. He said, be holy, for I am holy. It is the mark of His children, the seal of His presence, the reflection of His glory. Heaven rejoices when His chosen ones walk in holiness because they reveal the image of their Father to a lost world. Every step in righteousness makes the heart of God glad. Compromise may seem small, but it corrodes the soul like poison. One step into sin leads to another until chains are formed. But chosen ones, when you reject compromise and choose holiness, you break the devil's schemes. Heaven smiles when you shine as a beacon in a world drowning in darkness. Holiness is the banner that declares Christ's victory in you. The enemy whispers that holiness is too hard, too strict, too impossible. But heaven rejoices when you prove him wrong by walking in the power of the Spirit. Holiness is not about your strength, but about His grace working in you. Chosen ones, when you lean on Him and choose purity over sin, you bring joy to the Father's heart and shame to the kingdom of darkness. Every decision matters. The music you listen to, the words you speak, the thoughts you entertain, the places you go, each choice is an offering before God. Heaven rejoices when you sanctify yourself and set your life apart. Chosen ones, when you live in holiness, you are declaring war on compromise, and the sound of your obedience becomes a shout of victory in heaven. Holiness is not isolation from the world, but separation from its corruption. You may walk among sinners, but you do not walk in sin. Heaven rejoices when you live as salt and light, untainted by the filth around you. Chosen ones, holiness is not about what you avoid, but about who you reflect, the purity and majesty of the King of Kings. There is joy in heaven when you guard your eyes, your ears, and your heart. When you say no to temptation and yes to righteousness, you are offering God the greatest treasure you have, your obedience. Heaven smiles when his chosen ones value his presence more than the fleeting pleasures of sin. Holiness is the love song of the faithful rising into the throne room of God. The power of holiness is that it not only pleases God, but also impacts the world. People see a difference. They feel the light of God radiating from your life. Holiness is attractive because it carries the fragrance of Christ. Chosen ones, when you walk in holiness, you make heaven rejoice and you become a living testimony that God is real, powerful, and present in his people. So when you choose holiness over compromise, you're doing more than keeping rules. You are stirring joy in the Father's heart, releasing light into the darkness, and declaring that his kingdom is alive in you. Every time you say yes to purity and no to sin, heaven celebrates, angels rejoice, and the smile of God shines brighter upon your life. Faith is the thunder that shakes heaven and earth, the daring step that makes the Father smile with joy. When you rise against fear, when you believe in the face of impossibility, heaven cannot remain silent. Bold faith is the language that God responds to, the key that unlocks his miracles. Chosen ones, when you step out in faith, all of heaven rejoices because you have chosen to trust him above all else. The Bible says, without faith, it is impossible to please God. That means every time you dare to believe, you bring joy to his heart. Faith is not just a thought in your mind, it is an action in your steps, a fire in your spirit, a declaration that God is greater than circumstances. Chosen ones, the moment you move forward, when everything tells you to retreat, the Father smiles upon you. Abraham stepped out not knowing where he was going, yet his faith made heaven rejoice. Peter stepped out of the boat and walked on water, and all of eternity recorded his bold step of trust. Faith is never silent. It is always seen, always heard, always alive. Chosen ones, when you step into the unknown with nothing but God's word, heaven shouts for joy because faith has risen. The devil fears your faith more than your strength, more than your wisdom, more than your resources. For faith connects you directly to the power of God. Fear paralyzes, but faith releases the impossible. Heaven rejoices when you silence fear with faith, when you rise above doubt with trust. Chosen ones, every step of bold faith declares that God is true and his word cannot fail. Faith is not waiting for everything to be perfect before you move. It is moving because God has spoken, even when nothing looks ready. The Father rejoices when he sees his children trust him without evidence in sight. Chosen ones, bold faith is the refusal to be limited by what the eyes see. It is believing in what he has promised because his word is stronger than reality. When you take steps of faith, you stir heaven's resources into motion. Provision comes where there was lack. Healing flows where there was sickness. Doors open where there were only walls. God delights when his chosen ones dare to believe for more because faith honors his power. Chosen ones, every time you step out in faith, you make room for God to show himself strong. Bold faith is contagious. It ignites others around you. When you walk in faith, others begin to rise and believe as well. Your step of trust becomes a testimony that inspires a multitude. Heaven rejoices because one person's faith can unlock blessings for many. Chosen ones, your bold faith is not just for you, it is a fire that spreads and glorifies God in the lives of others. Faith is not always comfortable, but it is always victorious. You may tremble, you may face opposition, but when you step forward in faith, you step into the realm of heaven's delight. The Father rejoices when you depend fully on him, not your strength, not your plan, not your security. Chosen ones, bold faith is the bridge between God's promises and your reality. Every giant that falls, every mountain that moves, every sea that parts begins with bold faith. Heaven rejoices because faith proves that you believe God is bigger than every obstacle. Chosen ones, when you dare to say, I will trust him even here, even now, even against all odds, you release heaven's joy upon your life. Faith is the anthem that makes the throne room resound with celebration. So when you step out in bold faith, you are stepping into the smile of God, stirring his delight and causing heaven to rejoice. The Father takes pleasure in your trust, in your courage, in your confidence in his word. Chosen ones, every act of bold faith is a shout of victory that echoes in eternity, and the heart of God rejoices as you move where fear cannot go. The gifts God placed within you were never meant to lie dormant. They were planted to bear fruit and glorify his name. When you rise to serve others with what he has entrusted to you, heaven rejoices because your life becomes a channel of his love. Chosen ones, the smile of God shines upon those who pour themselves out as vessels of blessing. Every act of service echoes the heartbeat of the Father. You may think your gift is small, but there is no such thing as insignificant in the kingdom. The loaves and fish seemed little until they were placed in the Master's hands and they fed thousands. Heaven rejoices when you take what you have and use it to lift another, to encourage, to heal, to strengthen. Chosen ones, God delights in your willingness more than your measure. Service is not about position, it is about obedience. You may never stand on a platform, but when you wipe tears, when you feed the hungry, when you speak life into the broken, heaven smiles. The Father delights when you become his hands and feet in a hurting world. Chosen ones, every hidden act of service shines as a jewel in eternity. When you use your gifts for yourself, you may find temporary satisfaction, but when you use them for others, you touch eternity. Heaven rejoices because you are reflecting the very nature of Christ, who came not to be served but to serve. Chosen ones, every time you use your gift to bless, you reveal the character of Jesus to the world. Your gift was not given for storage, but for multiplication. Just as a seed only fulfills its purpose when planted, so your gift only fulfills its purpose when released. Heaven rejoices when you refuse to bury what God has placed in you. Chosen ones, the Father smiles when you let your light shine, blessing others and glorifying his name. So every time you serve, you are not just meeting a need, you are stirring joy in heaven. Every time you give, you are bringing a smile to the Father's face. Every time you lift another with your gift, you are writing a testimony in eternity. Chosen ones, the heart of God rejoices when his people rise to serve, for in that moment, his kingdom is revealed on earth as it is in heaven. Chosen ones, the heavens are open and the Father is smiling, for you have stepped into the very things that delight his heart. The sound of surrender, the fragrance of forgiveness, the purity of holiness, the fire of bold faith, and the sacrifice of service are rising before his throne. The Lord of glory is not silent. He is rejoicing over you with singing. He is delighting in your obedience, and he is releasing favor upon your life like rivers that cannot be stopped. This is the hour where the hand of God is stretched forth over his chosen ones. You have broken the chains that held you back, and heaven has taken notice. Where the enemy once accused, now the Father is declaring, "This is my beloved, in whom I am well pleased." The smile of God is not an empty image. It is power, it is favor, it is blessing flowing into every corner of your life. Chosen ones, you are stepping into days where doors will open not by might, not by power, but by the joy of the Lord upon you. The nations will see the difference upon your life. Those who mocked you will witness the glory of God that rests on you. You will not walk in the shadows of compromise, but in the blazing light of holiness. You will not stumble in bitterness, but rise in the liberty of forgiveness. You will not live timid and afraid, but stride in bold faith that moves mountains. You will not hide your gifts, but multiply them until the name of the Lord is exalted in every place. This is the season of heaven's delight manifesting on earth. Chosen ones, when God smiles, the earth must respond. When the Father delights, no devil can stop the blessing he pours out. You are walking under the banner of his joy, and that banner is victory. Strongholds are falling, chains are breaking, miracles are being released because heaven has rejoiced over your obedience. What was impossible yesterday is possible today because God is smiling on you. Lift your eyes and see, The favor of the Lord is resting upon you like a mighty mantle. This is not the season of silence, but the season of overflow. You have aligned yourself with his heart, and now his hand is moving on your behalf. The windows of heaven are opening, and blessing is being poured out until there is no room to contain it. Chosen ones, the delight of the Father is spilling over into your destiny. There is a sound of victory over your life, a sound of breakthrough, a sound of joy that will not be silenced. You will go where others fear to go because faith has risen within you. You will shine where darkness tried to cover you because holiness has marked you. You will bless multitudes with the gifts you once hid because service has become your song. And all of it is because heaven has smiled in joy over your obedience. Chosen ones, step into this new season without fear. Walk boldly under the smile of the Father. Let the world see the radiance of his delight upon your face. Let your life become a testimony that God rejoices in his people. This is not the time to shrink back. This is the time to rise in power, in purity, in faith, and in service. The eyes of heaven are upon you. The hand of God is with you, and his joy is your strength. Now declare it with your life, chosen ones. You have surrendered, you have forgiven, you have chosen holiness, you have stepped out in faith, you are serving with your gifts. And because of this, heaven is smiling over you with joy unspeakable. The Father delights in you, the Spirit empowers you, the Son walks beside you. Go forth, for this is your hour, this is your season, this is the moment when God's chosen ones make heaven rejoice.